Ladies and gents, welcome back. The big story today is, well, of course, the big trial. Is it going to be a show trial? Well, I'm not sure how this is going to go on, but this is Tamara Lich and Chris Barber, of course, the leaders, most well-known people in the Freedom Convoy, are on trial right now for, well, I want to call it trumped up charges, but I'm not a lawyer. So when I have questions about things like this, I like to bring in experts, people who know a little bit more about these kinds of things. So today joining me is John Carpay. Thank you so much, John, for joining me today.
Hey, glad to be with you, Clyde.
So tell me a little bit about what you do. So you're for the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, and you've been representing a lot of cases over the past year that I've been reading about in the news, namely representing Tamara Lich and Chris Barber. What do you guys, first and foremost, what is it that you do as a law firm?
So we fight for the rights and freedoms of Canadians. We're 12 years old. We were not that well known in the first 10 years. We were growing steadily, doing a lot of cases for campus free speech when university students get threatened with expulsion for peacefully expressing unpopular views on campus. Religious freedom, freedom of association. So basically fighting for charter rights and freedoms. And then when the government started to violate not just the rights and freedoms of a smaller number of people, but on a massive scale, right? Starting in March of 2020, if the government says you cannot have Christmas dinner with your mother or with your son, that's a violation of your freedom of association. When pastors are thrown in jail over exercising their religious freedom, that's another violation of charter rights. When you've got the Emergencies Act invoked to crack down on a peaceful protest, that's a violation of your charter freedom of peaceful assembly. When doctors are threatened with the loss of their license to practice medicine because they disagree with the government narrative about lockdowns and vaccines, that's an assault on freedom of expression. So the Justice Center grew a lot because we were probably the only registered charity in Canada that called for an end to lockdowns. We did that early on, starting in March of May. So lockdowns imposed in March. 2 months later, in May, the Justice Center said, end the lockdowns. They are utterly unscientific. Mm-hmm. They're doing way more harm than any good. 3.5 years later, I still have to see persuasive evidence from government that the lockdown saved any lives at all. There's lots of claims to that effect. There's propaganda where they tell you over and over and over again that lockdown saved lives, but no evidence. So the Justice Center is funded by voluntary donations. We have represented hundreds of Canadians going way back to 2010, but especially the last 3 years. Mm-hmm. And we have paid for and continue to pay for the legal bills for criminal defense for Chris Barber, now on trial in Ottawa.
Well, I'll make sure that there's a link in the description down below so anyone who wishes to donate to your cause. And you guys have been doing a lot of work. In fact, you guys, I mean, have you ever expected it to be so busy? I mean, most of us didn't expect our country to go the route that it's been going, almost a totalitarian shift in our recent history. Lots of crackdowns on civil liberties, lots of crackdowns on people's, all of the rights that are laid out in our charter. Now, what's happening with this case with Tamara Lich and Chris Barber? What are actually the charges that the government are coming after them for? We all know that they went to the protest. I think the worst thing that they did that people were annoyed with was honking horns. And we're in a situation where they're being charged, and is there a real chance that they could be put in prison over this?
Well, unfortunately, yeah, there is a real chance. I make a habit of never predicting the outcome in a court case. Anybody who tries to predict whether there's going to be an acquittal or a conviction is a fool. We just don't know. Mm-hmm. You never know what the judge is thinking, and you don't really know ahead of time what the evidence is going to be, what the evidence is going to look like. But sadly, this is the tragic thing. I mean, these neither Chris Barber nor Tamara Lich should have been charged in the first place. Tamara Lich did not even have a truck in Ottawa, and it is not a criminal offense to park a truck illegally. The Emergencies Act is only supposed to be invoked when all other law enforcement mechanisms are inadequate for dealing with the situation. That's written into the legislation. So here we have a situation where the City of Ottawa and the Province of Ontario could have engaged in law enforcement by issuing more parking tickets, by having the trucks towed. The City of Ottawa could have handed out fines for having a protest without a permit. They could have gone under provincial legislation and gotten an injunction. There's all kinds of things. But instead, we have the Prime Minister declaring a national emergency based on a peaceful protest in one city only, because by the time the national emergency was declared on February 14th, the Coutts border blockade in Alberta had ended, and the Manitoba and Ontario blockades had ended. And so you're left with a peaceful protest in Ottawa, which admittedly it's causing inconvenience and hardship to some extent to some of the residents of downtown Ottawa, but it's peaceful. We don't have buildings set on fire like the Black Lives Matter protests in the US. We don't have vandalism. We don't have assault. We don't have crime. And they proceed to criminal law. So Tamara Lich is charged with mischief. There's several, which includes things like vandalizing property. Well, she absolutely has not, and the Crown has no evidence. The other one is to interfere with the lawful use and enjoyment of property. Now, maybe that's some allusion that the Crown is making to illegal parking, but again, it's not parking your vehicle illegally is not a criminal offense. It doesn't warrant criminal charges in the same way that a speeding ticket, yes, it's a provincial offense, but it's not criminal. Chris Barber has been charged also with mischief and obstruction of justice and all kinds of offenses. But these are indeed, they're trumped up charges. We've become like a banana republic, but with polar bears, where if you criticize the Prime Minister, you run the real prospect of getting criminally charged and spending time in jail.
So you listed off a lot of things that they could have done. I think one you missed was talk to them. I think that was something they definitely could have tried to do, and that was definitely something they didn't do. Now, the charge of mischief is such a confusing one for most people. What is that charge? Is that actually just a charge where you could just assume anything, or break that down? Like, what does that actually mean?
Well, it's worth reading. I don't have it. I don't have it in front of me, and I don't have all four components memorized. But if you Google Criminal Code of Canada mischief, Section 430, but if just Criminal Code of Canada mischief, you can see the heads there. So there is vandalism of property, right? If I spray paint your car or key your car or whatever, destroy something that belongs to you. Vandalism is one of the forms of mischief. That is criminal. Destroying somebody else's property on purpose is a criminal code offense under mischief. The other one is interference with the lawful use and enjoyment of property. So if you were mowing your front lawn and I got onto your front lawn and I stood between you and your lawnmower and prevented you from using it, or if I prevented you from getting into your car, prevented you from getting out of your car, that is interference with the lawful use and enjoyment of property. The other two heads, I apologize, I should have them memorized as well, but those are examples of the criminal code offense. And it's unfortunate in a way that's called mischief, because it sounds like, you got into mischief means that you disobeyed your mother's order not to eat the cookies, right?
Yeah, it sounds like Dennis the Menace or something like that. It doesn't sound like a real thing. It almost sounds like something that, they could just pull out of a hat and say, oh, well, this falls under mischief, right? Like you're annoying somebody. That's how it really sounds to people. But I understand that you can actually carry a decent sized penalty for the charge of mischief. Is that correct?
Well, yes and no. I mean, if you did, depending on your criminal record, depending on the severity of the vandalism, et cetera, if you did spray paint your neighbor's car, or if you took your key and put a big scratch in your neighbor's car, again, that would be criminal. But if you had no criminal record, if you were convicted, you would not spend time in jail. there might be a restitution order requiring you to pay the $1,000 or whatever to fix your neighbor's car. That could be part of the criminal order. But you're not going to spend time in jail, or if you did, it might be a day or a weekend. But Tamara Lich has spent 49 days in jail in total, and if she was convicted of mischief, there would not be any jail time. So the Crown prosecutors in Ottawa have been incredibly aggressive and political, even to keep her locked up pending bail. I know criminal defense lawyers who have had clients charged with murder that are, back out on the streets within a few hours. So that this woman was locked up initially for 12 days, and then subsequently she was locked up again. It's a political persecution. She was a political prisoner in Canada while she was locked up.
Right, and we're hearing about the case of the Coots 4 as well that are in a similar situation. They've been in jail for over 560 days under similar trumped-up charges. This is becoming a new regular thing for Canadians, and it's really, really difficult to bear. And this is why I like to bring these stories to the forefront. And I'm so glad that we have people in the legal business that are donating so much time to this kind of thing. So what other cases do you have on the go at the moment? Like, what are some of the things that you're representing as well?
Well, we're waiting on a court ruling. When the government invoked the Emergencies Act and said that a peaceful protest in one city constituted a national emergency, within 10 days we filed a court action, and we are seeking a court declaration that this was illegal on the part of the Prime Minister. We kind of suspected that the Public Order Emergencies Commission, the public inquiry, would not necessarily produce a good result, and it did not. It was very mealy-mouthed and ambiguous. But in this court action, we're awaiting a ruling. The Justice Center is waiting for a ruling for the court to declare, hopefully, that this was illegal on the part of the Prime Minister, that there were not adequate grounds for invoking the Emergencies Act. With there's no serious threat to life or safety. That was one reason. But the other one is you can only declare a national emergency when normal, ordinary law enforcement is not possible, right? Which makes sense, because if normal law enforcement mechanisms are functioning, are working, why do you need to declare a national emergency? It should only be declared when the situation is such that normal law enforcement cannot address the situation, and that was certainly not the case here. We're also, in that same case, we've challenged the freezing of bank accounts. So awaiting a ruling on that in the same court action. The Justice Center is also defending Chris Barber, Tamara Lich in a civil action. We referenced that. Ottawa resident claiming $300 million in damages over losing some sleep because of the horn honking.
And that's a big class action that Zexi Lee was the one who brought that case. I think it's being represented by Paul Champ, the lawyer in Ottawa, who made himself famous with the POEC. But again, these are frivolous things that we believe that the government are doing now. Give us a little bit of hope. Is there like legal action that is actually getting somewhere? Because we've heard a lot of stories, of the government declaring things to be moot as soon as we challenge them in court. It's moot. It's no longer a thing. But then they could always bring it back, and this is what's scary for a lot of people. We want precedent so we can say, you're not allowed to do that again. Are we making any strides in any fields or in any of these cases?
Well, most of the court rulings in respect of the lockdowns and vaccine passports, for the most part, they've been disappointing. But the race goes not to the swift, but to those who have perseverance. And we're in this for the long haul. The positive thing is, even when we lose a court action, we secure big achievements by exposing how fraudulent the government is behaving. For example, in Brian Peckford's constitutional challenge to the travel restrictions, which is now before the Federal Court of Appeal, it was rendered moot almost a year ago in October 2022, and so that's on its way to the Federal Court of Appeal. In that court action, we had government officials admitting under oath that there's no medical or scientific basis for the federal government policy of barring unvaccinated Canadians from flying on airplanes. We would never, ever have achieved that or obtained that admission from the federal government, but for the fact that we launched a court action. And when we do that, we force the government to move beyond the mere fear-mongering through news conferences and taxpayer-funded repetition of false claims and hokey reports, models that come up with false projections that later prove to be completely inaccurate. They have to get outside of that, and now they have to try to impress the court because they're not necessarily confident that they're going to win for sure. And then they present this pathetic evidence in court that doesn't support the government's policies, and you've got federal government officials admitting under oath that there's no medical or scientific basis for the travel restrictions. So that's an accomplishment in and of itself. The other thing is governments will back down. We secured the reissuance of passports. In 2020, the federal government declared that because of the virus, they could no longer issue passports, which obviously creates extreme hardship on a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so a few days after filing the court action, the government said, okay, we will start to reissue passports again. And they didn't want to fight that because they didn't have, other than their own, laziness and incompetence, they didn't have a valid reason for stopping the issuance of passports to Canadians. So because of the court action, the federal government changed its course of action. We were, the Justice Centre was the first group to challenge the ArriveCan application, which, as you may recall, seniors and people without smartphones had to, get $5,000 fines over not using this piece of technology, which wasn't working all that well in the first place. So we sued the federal government. And then a few weeks later, the federal government just dropped the policy and said, okay, it is no longer mandatory to use the ArriveCan app.
I see. So some of these court challenges, it actually causes them to change policy and change course rather than just have your day in court. It's actually a big positive in that way. So I would love to thank you so much, John Carpay, for joining me today. And of course, all the links will be in the description down below where people can go and they can donate to your cause and get more legal action going, because there's more issues happening every single day that the Canadians just need this type of help when it comes to our civil liberties. So thank you again so much.
Thanks for having me on your show. It's a pleasure and an honor. Have a good night.